Greetings, my friends. Mkwann here. Gregorian calendar date, December 9th, 2025. So that equates to about 20 degrees Sagittarius and tropical. They're interchangeable. You could say a date, or you could say a degree and a sign, and they both point to the same thing, a tracking mechanism of the sun in physical space, if you will. So to make that a little bit more tangible or clear, the solstices and the equinoxes are the touch points in the observable, knowable orbit of the sun. And we're 10 days away. We're 10 days away from the winter solstice. More or less 10 days. I don't know if it's the 21st or the 20th. It can vary by a day, year to year. But the solstice in itself is a specific thing. Like the winter solstice is the day with the least amount of daylight. And so the days have been getting shorter, and they reach the shortest. I mean, more or less it stays the same for 3 days. And then each day begins to get more light. Like that's kind of like what's being measured. And so if we call that the solstice, the winter solstice, December 20th, or if we call it 0 degrees Capricorn, that's the first degree of Capricorn, which is the cardinal sign of Earth. That's how the tropical system lines up. They're both saying the same thing. You just need to be able to go back and forth for it to make sense to you in your rational mind. Part of getting lost through the indoctrination of the collective paradigm dream is what I'm pointing out to you is either not known, or for the people who kind of know it, they don't realize that it's significant, that the calendar system and the zodiac system can be interchangeable with measurement of the sun. Because both the zodiac and the calendar are so widespread in the collective culture. There are a lot of people, like everyone follows the calendar, and some people follow astrology. The very few do what I'm describing to you right now, which is like, let's just overlap the two. Because that's not being done, because that's not really talked about, but it's obvious. It sits in the backdrop of the collective mind, maybe in the collective mind subconscious. And that is if you will, the breeding ground for getting lost in the collective dream. When you don't think like this, your mind just knots it all up. And it being knotted up in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. When we say good or bad, we're using judgment, which is different than discernment. But when things such as the calendar and the zodiac, which the entire culture is more or less built upon, when it's unclear, when it's never really stated clearly, there are all sorts of implications. There are all sorts of implications, and those implications are how in practical terms, consciousness gets lost in the dream. All these little small things. So if you can't tell, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Really discerning through, quote unquote, the dream, or dream-like, saying that this realm is a dreamscape. That feels, to use that language feels a little bit more appropriate, because it has been said many times that this is a dream. But that's unclear. What do you mean this is a dream? I don't know, is this a dream? I don't know. I don't know anything. I just know that we're here. But I can pay attention to how here works. And what we're doing is we are articulating how this dreamscape works. And by articulating it, we are untangling many, many, many of these knots. So that's what we're going to continue to do. That's what I talked about before. And this is, I'm going to cover what I think is going to be some really good material. So hold on. I had to look around and make certain I got all my supplies for this video. And let me let you in on a little secret before I go any further. I'm recording this right now at my parents' house, my parents live in a community called The Villages, Florida. And if you've never heard of the Villages in Florida, you should, kind of go and do a little bit of research, because the place, there's no more appropriate location to be dissecting or untangling the collective dream right here in the Villages, Florida. So anyway, let's jump into this presentation. There are going to be a couple different layers to it, and we'll talk again at the end of this video. In the dream of being here, life is always rendered around you in a circle, and you are in the center. Pi r squared is your boundary of reality. All right, so this is nuts. One of the cool things about standing in front of a large body of water is that you have an uninterrupted, horizontally flat, if you will, horizon line. Horizon line being where the sky meets the land, or earth. I'll call like water the land in this scenario. Because typically you don't have that. If you're like in a forest, you can't see the horizon because of the trees. If you're in a city, if you're in a hilly area, all these different things. So it's one of the cool things, as I said, in front of a large body of water, you can see that. And undoubtedly, if you look out on the horizon, you'll see that it creates a curve. It doesn't necessarily curve down, it curves around you. And no matter where you are on the beach, this happens. Like when you look around, there's this curvature, and it happens for everyone. And so if you were to be up on top of a mountain, if you were to be on a rowboat in the middle of the ocean, and you'd be able to rotate all the way around and see the horizon, you're going to see that reality renders itself in circular form, and you are in the center. Like that is a 100% accurate description of the mystery of being alive in this body on this thing called Earth and what they call space. And so, like it almost seems like climactic to just say that, but it's true. So you, me, we all have our reality rendered. And what I mean by that is you look with your eyes, and whatever it is we see, like that's being rendered in our internal experience. And it's circular. Just that in alone applied to the coffer illusion and the tendency of seeing circles or squares, like I talked about that in an earlier video. Apply those two things together. But okay, we're going to go back to, it is a actual truth of your experience that you render, I render, we all render reality here in a circular form. So now we're going to go to this thing which is part of the indoctrination system, which is the establishment of pi r squared, the circle geometry everyone learns in middle school. Like this is part of the indoctrination system understanding. And what it basically says is it creates mathematically, or it encodes like, this is what the boundary of a circle is. And on a certain level, not your conscious level, not the level of being here now, but on like a deeper level of programming, the same level of programming that happens when you watch TV or when you go through, when people speak a language in a household. Like there is a formation of programming that's happening that one is unaware of. Well, the same is true here. And really what this is saying is it creates a boundary. We're talking about this with discernment as opposed to judgment, neither good nor bad. We're just recognizing, like, yes, all indoctrinated middle schoolers go through this pi r squared, and it really is the definition of, like, the relationship defines the mathematical area, the space of a circle. And you always, which is based upon figuring out from the center point of the circle, that's what the radius is. And you, me, as an individual, are actually experiencing reality at the center of the circle point. So there's a certain level of reality where this is, where you in a circle, like, that's becoming stronger. So we're going to pause for that for a moment, because this is where people start to get lost in the dream. Like, I go back to what I just said about, like, you go and you look how life renders around you in a circle. And one of the paths you could go down is, like, that's proof that it's a simulation, and I'm a character in a video game. Like, maybe. Or you go down the question of, like, well, why is that? And you could go down, like, is the earth flat? Is it a globe? Or spherical? Is it another shape? You could go down that level. And you're never going to know. You're going to be chasing your tail. That's part of the dream-like nature of this reality. When the only real truth is like, yes, yes, I know I'm here. And secondly, I can see that it does render around in a circle. And you can even go further with that, the call for illusion. I know that my reality will shift based upon what my environment is. That though it renders in a circle, I can see squares first and foremost. So anyway, we don't want to go down this path. Like, yeah, these are certainly interesting questions, but when you start to go down that path, you get lost. You're trying to, like, name what this place is. And if you come from a perspective that I'm not trying to name it, I just accept that I'm here, and I know that there's more than here, but this is the dream realm, well, then we're starting to move through it. Also want to point this out here. Pi r squared, like, it almost sounds like a statement. Pi's are squared, right? No, a pi is round. So there's already, like, an implication with the word pi and circle in our culture, and then squared. And this goes and, like, lines up exactly with this symbol and its multitude. I don't want to say infinite, but there are many, 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 many ways of interpreting this shape, which is this dream shape, which is everywhere. But yes, circle and square, circle and square. You are in the center of the circle. And so that's a thing, right? That's a thing in, like, Freemasonry and esoteric practices, is like the quote-unquote squaring the circle. And it probably represents something a little bit bigger than what I'm getting at right now. But again, we can kind of see from that perspective, like facial recognition software, as it shows like that circle face in a square. That could be thought of it. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, you're moving through the dream, just recognizing this is dreamlike, and you can see these themes are showing up consistently. And the discernment is recognizing it. And then the judgment comes from the discernment plus values or preferences. And we're just sitting at the discernment level right now. So now we're going to go a little bit further. So here's another really popular, a little bit more esoteric formula, which is part of the indoctrination system, which is equals MC squared. And you look at them and you're like, wow, there's like a similarity just in terms of their structure, like vowel, equal sign, two like symbols and then squared afterwards. Maybe go a step further. Pi is a constant, and this C is a constant as well. This is the speed of light, and this is the ratio between a radius of a circle and its circumference. But the deeper level is like this is part of, like, you know, it's built into the indoctrination system. Like very few of us actually go and like study what this is or like do it in quantum physics, mathematics, but I think everyone recognizes this. You know, this is part of the culture. And it comes from this thing called the theory of relativity, which is tied into Einstein, and now you're left in the same sort of dilemma, like, oh, well, is it flat? Is it globe? It's like, you know, was he real? Was he fake? You know, all that sort of stuff. You can just kind of like ignore that noise. Just ignore that noise, and you just treat it like what is being presented. What is being presented? And knowing that this is a dreamlike space, right? And no matter what, it's a dream. So you just kind of moving through it. So let's go back. The dream here, what we know is factual, is that the theory of relativity is built into everything in the main paradigm, the modern explanation of reality, quantum physics and computers and nuclear bombs and all that sort of stuff. So this deals with, whereas right here, this is just purely space and boundaries, right? This is like two-dimensional space, a flat circle. Now we're getting into, when we're getting into here, we're getting into movement, space, and time, and mass. So mass is a little bit different than space. But we're beginning to, like, think of these as like daisy chained or connected to one another through their similar structure. It's only true on the deepest level of dream program that this is a similar complementary structure. And now we're linking in like two-dimensional stuff to like three-dimensional stuff. These are stories, right? Like, these are stories that are told to you, that you're indoctrinated into your experience, and then, you know, you go out and you live the dream. When they talk about, so the little bit which, like the typical person who looks into equals MC squared, one of the first things is, when that's trying to be explained, you know, this is so complex. This is so complex that, like, you can't really understand it. So let me kind of like dumb it down for you. Like, that's kind of how it's positioned. And the first level of explanation of equals MC squared typically talks about this idea of a person's on a spaceship traveling at the speed of light, and they leave Earth and they go for a trip and they come back at the speed of light, and then they were gone for 15 minutes, and then they age for 15 minutes. But the person who said goodbye to them when they took off, when they come back, that person's aged like 20 years. What? Like, this is what they tell you. Like, that's like it doesn't make sense to the logical mind. The logical mind is trying to understand it. So this is like a Mobius flip. This is like, you're being told, like, this is how reality works. And reality is relative, and like, like literally aging changes. And not only that, like, objects change size, like a ruler changes shape. Like, this is being told in your E equals MC squared explanation. Is like, oh yeah, that this is a dreamlike reality, and depending upon circumstances, like time is experienced differently, and physical material matter will change. Now you begin right here, like you were in the center of a circle, and now you're told like everything can change. Like this is completely like decoding dreamlike reality, like, or saying that this, realm operates like a dream. And then it's also connected to experience feeling. The other thing connected to when EMC squared is trying to be explained in a very relatable way, this is the quote: "Put your hand on a hot stove for a minute and it'll seem like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour and it'll seem like a minute." That's relativity. And so now this E equals, that example is meant to explain E equals MC squared in terms that the normal Joe can understand. But what is being implied here is that this whole sort of equals MC squared also is very much about experience feeling. Like, I enjoy this. I enjoy, when things are something I enjoy. In this example, sitting with a pretty girl, time speeds up. And when I'm doing something which is painful, time slows down. But it's really the same thing. Like, if anything, in this example, like, it's the opposite, because this is a split second and that's an hour. Again, like, we're not trying to really, like, nail down what this means as much as we recognize that there is built into the paradigm system. They're telling you this is a dream. This is a dreamlike environment. I'm not going to call it a dream. I'm going to say it's a dreamscape, because I don't know what this place is, but I know that it behaves like a dream, and they're always telling you this. All right? So, and so this is where it gets tricky. It's like, you want to go and there's a tendency, like I want to know the right answer, and equals MC squared, which basically is, at the most basic level, is saying that mass equals energy. It's saying that everything solid is actually not solid. Here we've got this quote on Tesla, on Einstein. The Tesla thing is, this Tesla, I don't want to go too deep in it, but Tesla is another example of saying, it's kind of built into this dreamscape in the indoctrination. Like, Tesla's put out there for everyone to kind of know, and all quote unquote, people who wake up to the natures of reality walk through the bridge of Tesla. And then, what is that? A lot of it is just sort of concepts, right? What is it? Tesla says that if you understand 3, 6, and 9, you understand the universe, or something like that. Well, what exactly does that mean? But is it built? Is that part of the dream itself? So again, this is where discernment comes in. You look at it, it's part of it. You know that it may feel more true, it may even be more accurate of a description, or a disentanglement of the description of maybe some of the physics. But really where we want to be grounded is in our own actual experience. Again, you go down this thing, well, equals MC squared, and there's a tendency to go well, he was a fraud, and the whole thing is, and you counter that with the story of equals MC squared is part of the mechanism or the mathematics used to go and create the atomic weapons and the nuclear bombs, and that's built into the one of my favorite storytellers, Christopher Nolan's story of Oppenheimer, of this whole sort of thing, of nuclear bombs and Einstein and blah blah blah. And then you go to the level of well, no, there's no nuclear power, there's no nuclear weapons. And again, how do you know? The point is not to get caught up in that world. Because as soon as you get caught up in there, and as soon as you kind of find your quote unquote solid ground, this is the truth and this is not the truth, you're committing to a certain sort of dream. So where I'm going with all that is discerning one's way. This doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter to me. The moment it matters to you, well, then perhaps it is worthy of kind of making that more real. But for now, like, the discernment is recognizing, like, kind of moving through what is observable truth, what is known, where does the divergence occur, where do you need to make a choice, do I need to make a choice? That's the next question. This is where a choice must be made. Einstein's a fraud, he's not a fraud. EMC squared is bullshit, or it's not bullshit. Nuclear energy is a real thing, it's not a real thing. If you don't need to make that decision, well, then you don't have to make that decision. And the dream wants you to make, the paradigm, collective dream wants you to make that decision. All right. So that kind of brings us to the next level of where we are in the stream, or in this presentation. And, all right, where to go with this? So I'm coming back to myself for a moment, and inside here, inside this little bag, I'm going to show you like a little thing I've been working on. And this is, I'm showing you this is because I'm thinking of, there's a famous quote, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." So what that means is to really understand the or the environment. You know, one doesn't need to be completely aware of the environment. They just need to have one eye, if you will, the one-eyed man is king. And so that is what I would describe with what I'm about to show you. So this is what I've been working on lately. Yeah, maybe you can see this good. And you're like, why are you showing this to me, particularly in context of what we just discussed? The reason why is this is an example of disentangling from the dream, particularly the collective dream, because at least from my perspective of what I put out in terms of, you know, stuff like what I talk about, is about becoming lucid in the dream. It's not collapsing the dream, perhaps. It's not trying to figure this out, but it's of what this place is as much as it is of becoming clear within one's point of view of experience that this is dreamlike. And then secondly, becoming disentangled from the matrix, which is the collective dream, which really doesn't serve anyone other than really anyone. Like even those on the very top of the paradigm are sucked from it. So that piece, which I just showed you, is a way of meeting. You know, I said a little while ago, I'm like, you don't want to lean into the Einstein stuff. You don't want to lean into this. I'm like, well, all right, well, what the fuck do I want to lean into? I'm not saying like do what I do, but I'm demonstrating a way which you can. So I'm going to come back and explain that in the middle, but in a moment. But what I just showed you is significant. All right, to understand that, we're really going to go and decode 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm not going to go too deep in it, but 2001: Space Odyssey, 1968. It follows the voyage of astronaut scientists and the sentient supercomputer HAL 9000 to Jupiter to investigate an alien monolith. That's the movie. And I've talked about before, you're probably very familiar, if you haven't seen the movie, at least with the concept of it. So a couple reasons why it's so significant within a certain layer of the dream is this movie was the first to really introduce into the collective mind a working model of what AI, human to AI interaction could look like. It came out 50 years ago, more or less, and it is surprisingly accurate to the actual experience which human beings are having right now. talking to ChatGPT or Siri or whatever the exchange would be. Like, this was on the money. And then secondly, we know that, this movie is used as a touch point in the meeting of the conspiratorial world and the NASA moon landings, because the 2001 Space Odyssey is said to be the vehicle in which Stanley Kubrick filmed all of the false moon landing stuff. And so it's tied in on that level. Like, this movie is so friggin' like tied into this, really the dream level, the waking up of the dream level of reality. For whomever, whatever reason it is. Then lastly, like, this to me is what I think is the most interesting, is within the movie is this kind of never explained thing of the monolith. I could spend an hour just talking about this monolith and subconscious and what it can mean, but we know that it's there. And it plays a significant sort of role within this movie, which already is playing a specific role. And this right here is the Millennium Downtown New York Hotel, which looks almost exactly in proportion and coloring to the monolith. And this is that hotel. It's a Hilton hotel. And this here is the location of the former World Trade Center buildings. It was right next to the World Trade Center. When the World Trade Center came down, this was standing. So this is literally was projected into the minds of all the people who watched the 9/11 stuff, like both on TV and maybe in person. This is the dreamiest dream fuck you can imagine. I mean, and it's a tricky place to go down. Like, do you want to go down the path where you're like, okay, this reality is so controlled that when they started building the World Trade Center towers, the two pillars of Freemasonry on September 11th, I think 1971 is when they started building them, or maybe that's when they finished it. I don't know. It's been a while since I researched it. And then to only bring them down in such a way, but then to also have it done in such a way that they'll build a secondary set of buildings, this Millennium Hotel, and then have it in such a place so that when the towers come down, it will come down and it will match in the backdrop the monolith. Like you go down the path, maybe that happened where, the Rockefellers and the Hiltons and they all got together and they planned this. Everything's on a 5,000 year plan. There's that, or this is all. I mean, there's many sort of ways which you can try to go and explain the fact, which is that it happened. Keep in mind, it happened in 2001, the year of the movie. The movie's called 2001 Space Odyssey. So we're beginning with that. We're just going to leave it right there. I mean, I could spend hours talking about this. And where I'm really going with right now is the idea of that first sentient computer. How? And I've talked about this before. This is pretty well known if you've looked into it. Like, HAL is a play on IBM, even though it's claimed that Kubrick said that there was no intended reference between HAL and IBM. It's just it seems unlikely based upon everything else you're told about Kubrick. But either way, HAL is HAL. Those three letters are, each of them are the letters before IBM. And IBM at the time was, in the late 60s, the biggest computer manufacturer on the planet. So now, this blends into my dream. This blends deeply into the dream which mkwann is dreaming. And a lot of my dream is tied to this thing called the Susquehanna River, right? And if you go and you look at the actual IBM headquarters, you'll see that IBM is located right on the Susquehanna River. It was located at 1701 North Street, Endicott, New York. that's where it is. Here's the Susquehanna River. You can see how close it is. And that gets into it because if this is the Susquehanna River, right here is the first computer. I've talked about that all this time, many, many times, and about how I don't know what a river is, but they say this is the oldest river and all the sort of things that are tied to the river. Again, this is all part of the dream. And at least, like, for me personally, I've kind of collapsed around this dream. And what I mean by collapsed is stop looking at other alternatives. But that's how the dream works, is like what you collapse and what you subscribe to, like it just works around it. So anyway, so here's the first computer. The first computer is ENIAC, 1945. ENIAC was at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, all right there. I've talked about this many, many times. But now we have also in the same ancient waterway, we have IBM's headquarters. IBM is, one of the creators of the backbone of the internet, and they did that by building mainframe computers, which house the technology. And, ARPANET, the predecessor of the internet, included nodes at the same place where ENIAC is, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Aberdeen, Maryland is part of the Army Ballistic Research Center. Like, it's all connected. This stuff is all connected. And so now we have on the same body of water, we've got like ENIAC, and now we've got like the builder or the originating touch points of the internet, IBM 360, HAL 9000, 369, right? There's your Tesla stuff. Like, we're just kind of tiptoeing around here. And we go and we look, this is where that IBM location is, right? Right here, this is Endicott, New York. There's the Susquehanna River. That's right here. This is where the river begins, right by Baseball Hall of Fame. And this is where the Herkimer Diamonds are located. And this is where all the anthracite is, also right by the beginning of the Mormon history. Anthracite, Herkimer. And then I'm also going to like slightly pivot, but I want to show this in here. This is Larimar. Larimar is a blue pectolate, and it is found only in the mountainous, relatively inaccessible region of the Dominican Republic, 10 kilometers southwest to the city of Barahona. So that ties into, obviously this is tied into the Susquehanna, and this Larimar ties into the Susquehanna mystery as well because of Edgar Cayce and where Edgar Cayce lived. Edgar Cayce both lived at the mouth of the Susquehanna Bay, or the Chesapeake Bay, which is also where the British Empire in Jamestown began. And he talked about what a lot of people in the dream world would say is he, quote unquote, predicted Larimar. This is Edgar Cayce. This is where he lived right here. This is Virginia Beach, First Landing Beach. This is, they're 2 miles away. Edgar Cayce's place is exactly 360 miles away from right here. This is all just like, dream stuff, but it's there. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, right? And Atlantis. This sounds dreamy as can be. Cayce envisioned a previously unknown blue stone of incredible beauty and potent healing power will be found somewhere in the Caribbean, where he believed the lost continent of Atlantis is located. The myth of Atlantis had a very special place in Cayce readings. This comes from the Larimar gemstone history and lore, because part of this Larimar story is that it was discovered in 1974, and it was, Like that is part of the story of Larimar. And where is Larimar founded? Or located? Remember, it's only located in one place on Earth. Is right here where Christopher Columbus first landed on Hispaniola, which is modern-day Dominican Republic. And Christopher Columbus is where the dream of the new world, the dream of globalism, where we've all woken up to, like where it says it went. Like the dream of globalism, if you unravel it, if you go backwards, goes through the British Empire, and the British Empire goes through the, quote unquote, establishment of the new world, and this is where the establishment of the new world began, and it's connected to Larimar. So, like, when you tie all that together, like, there's, like, the most, there's a shape there, there's a structure there, there's a continuity, but it's also not there. It's only in these very thin, gossamer threads, which are part of the, which are held in consciousness. But it's also real. Like, not only is it real in terms of like 9/11 and 2001 Space Odyssey, but Herkimer diamonds are a real thing, and Larimar is a real stone, and anthracite is a real stone. And when you go Herkimer, anthracite, and Larimar, that's, that spells how. And this Herkimer, where is it? And we see that Herkimer, anthracite are right by this IBM Howe location on the oldest river. And then, though this is not, the river goes from, where do we got this? This is just so nuts, right? This right here, this is Cooperstown. This right here is Endicott. This right here is the first computer. This is the Chesapeake Bay. I call it the Susquehanna Bay. And then right here is where Edgar Cayce and the Larimar story begins. Like, it's all the same circuit, which is said to be the oldest water circuit still flowing on Earth, which is a friggin' dream. Like, it's self-referencing, which is kind of real and not real. And it also bleeds through in this strange computer HAL IBM way. Like, there's a there, but it's also kind of ridiculous, right? You're like, well, what am I going to do with it? Let's even go one step further. Like, IBM, HAL is literally known as Big Blue. Like, that's the nickname for IBM. So what do you do with all that, right? Like it's a story. And stories are immensely significant. They're arguably the most, your reality in the dreamscape is built upon a story. Mine is. It's upon a story. There's nothing wrong with that. The dreamscape is built upon stories. How you meet that? What you do with it, like that's the part of the joy of whatever this place is, I suppose. So let's go back to this, right? In my body, in my physical reality, because I know that story. In fact, I crafted that story. I didn't invent the story. I crafted it by the pieces of information that has been presented by the very paradigm itself. This is where it gets really, really Mobius strip-like, because it folds onto itself, but it's folding onto itself in a way that there's some degree of awareness. Larimar, Herkimer, anthracite. In my physical body, I've been to all of those places, and I've gotten those physical stones. Like, those are real things. And what's so interesting about Herkimer, anthracite, and Larimar is where they're found in New York, in Pennsylvania, and in Dominican Republic, where they're formed in the earth. It's pretty much the only place on Earth where they're found. They're not the only, many minerals are only found in one spot. But these in particular, and they spell how. So I take it, and I begin to make this art piece of Herkimer. There's the Herkimer, the anthracite, and the Larimar. It's actually done in two places, because there's the Herkimer, there's another piece of the anthracite, and then there's Larimar. And I'm beginning to play, and I'm completely recalibrating, reorganizing both the concept of how, right? Like what I just showed you, like there's a truth to that. There's a truth. Herkimer, anthracite, Larimar, like they're stones. All the stories are true. It ties into IBM. It ties into 2001 Space Odyssey. It ties into the actual reality. But what does it mean? Likewise, you were told that all of these computers that were built, they came through like a raw material. They were once a stone, an oil, something material, and through a chemical/alchemical process was somehow able to turn into your friggin' smartphone. That's fucking dreamy as shit, right? How's this not any different? Now, I'm not claiming that this does anything. I'm just claiming that my relationship with the dream exists in a detangling and a reorientation. And that, to me, is an approach. And once a becoming lucid and becoming disentangled from the paradigm dream happens, well then, the game doesn't end. It's just like, it's different. I'm going to give you another example of like how to play in the dream. I don't know. It's like, I pause, I gave you that face about like to play in the dream, because there's a lot of like this is fun. We're going to Disneyland. We're going to play in the dream. Like, this is some heavy ass shit being human in this time period. I'll be the first one to state that. It is both immensely easy and it's both immensely like emotionally, psychologically difficult and all of those sort of things. And then how you meet that is how you play in the dream. So I'm just, I want to be clear when I'm like, this is how we play in the dream. I'm not saying that all of a sudden this is, like, I'm not saying it can't be fun or it can't be enjoyable, but this is whatever this place is, whatever this time is, it comes with a pressure. So I'm going to give you another example of like taking the elements that are around you and redefining them in a creative, playful way, because that is what this dream is also, is it's creative and experiential. It's all the things they told you in the beginning. Equals MC squared equals pi r squared. You're in your circle. You're the center of your circle. No matter where you are, you're in the center of the circle, and it moves around with you. But you can go and through discernment see what's showing up and begin to, like, in literal sense, when you're working at a level that both makes sense, like this makes logical sense, Herkimer, anthracite, Larimar, going there, reassembling it with it. If you're noticing, I'm not like discussing something about this, and that's purposeful. It's nothing more than reconfiguring the dream. And so here's another example. So here's another example. When I talked about like building the starboard and putting it on the sundial and lining it up, that's just a rearrangement with everything that's around you. And that seems to be that creative spirit coupled with an awareness is something that separates those that are completely asleep to those that are partially asleep. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So, all right, let's continue to the final part of this presentation. So all of that is like, all right, well, Well, let's go back to this. This is more dream play. Like I just, went into my own personal sort of expression, but let's go more general. Like we talked about this last time, like the circle and the clock and all of that. And there are cycles, and we can see how entrainment and cycles work on this realm, and the moon and the sun and Jupiter are in a very entrained cycle, a 1:12 ratio, where 12 moon cycles equals 1 solar cycle. The moon goes around here 12 times. So like the minute hand goes all the way around the clock 12 times, and in that 12 times the sun hand or the hour hand goes around once. Like that's a 12-to-1 ratio. And in the same way, this hand will go around 12 times. This Jupiter hand goes around once. And the Jupiter and the moon are connected also because they are mathematically aligned. And so this goes around 144. Like this is a thing. Like this is what it is. We don't need to define, but we can recognize it is an alignment. Remember how 9,000 went to Jupiter. This relationship, like all of the different planetary bodies, you can go and find different mathematical relationships, but this is the only one that has this type of relationship, which creates a proportion. So proportion are two ratios that are linked by one central number. This being the proportion is linked through the sun, and the sun is our primary rhythm in this dream. Like this is very, very accessible, like in terms of like it's easy to understand mathematically, but then like it makes sense and you can see it. So entrainment is the process where one rhythm or cycle synchronizes or is influenced by another. We are completely under the influence of the sun and moon all the time. So we're already naturally trained to it just by being indoctrinated to it. And entrainment's everywhere. There's brainwave entrainment. Remember, entrainment is when the two different cycles or rhythms synchronize. So, practice of entraining one's brain waves to desired frequency. There's entrainment in biomusicology, where the synchronism of organisms to an external rhythm. In chronobiology, alignment of circadian rhythms to like the sun. In engineering and hydrodynamics, this idea of entrainment, that's just part of this dream. Like everything connects to everything. Where you put your attention and entrains it to it, will find entrainment, and the rules of entrainment will show themselves. And often one of the qualities is like how easily does that entrainment happen? How quickly can the two different rhythms kind of sync up and link up? Entrainment is a mathematical description of vibrations or coupled oscillators, and it's fundamentally expressed through different equations and characterized by rational numbers and ratios, synchronization of frequencies, right? These are synchronized. Your consciousness is only aware of these two. And you're not even aware that this is happening. I guarantee it. Like, people, there's no need to be aware of this right now. Like, it requires effort to pay attention, to learn the language. But but you're always around it. Because it speaks to you in that dream space. The space where you're dreaming. And because these two are in the same sort of relationship as these two, like they all just flow, they harmonize with great ease. They entrain with great ease. Like entrainment is a real thing. It's resonance and entrainment. The idea of the opera singer who can hit a note, a very specific note, which that creates a resonance and entrainment with glass's natural frequency, causes the glass to break. Like this idea of entrainment and invisible forces is by no means like EMC squared, like dream gobbledygook. This is a real thing. So let me just kind of show this to you right now. Like I'm using this example right here of like a clock hand, like this. Imagine this is the clock face, and you've got like the minute hand, the hour hand, and the ultra hour hand being Jupiter. This is you standing on the horizon, which is the 9 and 3 position, and you're kind of watching it go round and round. That's what we are experiencing every single day, whether you're aware of it or not. Most people have no idea about these things, these orbits, these entrainment devices, which are constantly going round and round us. It's the nature of being here on Earth, but people aren't appreciating what's happening, and they're unaware of it, which allows it to become an invisible dream. So we become aware of it. And I'm going to make this like really understandable. Here is our astro chart. This ascendant, descendant line is the horizon. That's you standing on it. And I took the astro chart just a couple days ago, and I got rid of all the visual noise, and I left the sun, moon, and Jupiter. And so this is the exact same thing as this. And the sun. Slight pivot for those of you who just heard that. That's why I'm here. I'm caring for my mother. That was my mother's voice. So the sun goes around the zodiac. Well, let's go with this. One Jupiter orbit around the zodiac is the equivalent of 12 sun orbits around the zodiac, or 12 years. And that's the equivalent of 144 lunar orbits. Like that's the same thing as this. You could, and just by changing perspective, I mean, this is the same thing when they talk about E equals MC squared. One of the most important things in that idea of going on the rocket ship and the speed of light, the person who's on the rocket ship, like, yeah, their aging is slower than the person on Earth, and their ruler gets smaller. But they don't feel that. They don't feel that at all. It just feels normal. Likewise, the person who's stuck on Earth, who ages 20 years, and their ruler stays the same size, they're not feeling a contraction in time. They are feeling it as if it were normal. The point of view in which they were experiencing it just feels normal. So how we relate to that is we can look at these three different variables: the speed of the orbit, of the moon, of the sun, or Jupiter, and we can understand the other two 100% based and change the orientation from what we're comparing the other two. So I just did Jupiter. So for every one Jupiter, I started from one Jupiter orbit. Let's do from the moon's perspective. The moon does one orbit around the zodiac. Like, this is a physical thing. This happens all the time. This is you standing on Earth, and every 27 days, the moon makes a full orbit. In that time, for the Jupiter to cover this space, the sun goes 1/12 of the sun's orbit, and Jupiter goes 144th of its orbit. Or you could change your baseline perspective to the sun. You're like, well, the sun makes one orbit in that same time period. The moon goes around 12 times, and Jupiter goes around 1/12 of its orbit. Meanwhile, you're just standing here on Earth, caught up in whatever dream you're caught up on, but this is always happening. I'm going to make this a little bit even more clear. So this is where it gets fascinating. June 25th, 2025. So this was 3-4 days after the summer solstice of this year. And where were the moon, Jupiter, and sun? They were all in the early degrees of Cancer, using tropical zodiac. So if you know nothing about, even if you know about astrology, forget everything about like what it means and Cancer means this or not. Just think of this as a location. No different than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 12. Okay? So we see that on this date, in this year, the moon, Jupiter, and sun are in the same location. Just as if these three were in the same location. 1 year later, a little bit more than a year later, what do we see? This is as close as they come in 2026. And Jupiter, it's all dictated by Jupiter in this, this is the end of June. This is more or less the beginning of August 2026. So this is more or less 13 months later. This is 13 months later, right? Jupiter has gone from its location in the 4th sign, and now it's in the 5th sign. And now when it's conjunction, or when they line up with, and this is when it lines up with the moon and the sun. So it's just like this. The sun and we see, like as comparison, we look at, this would be 12 o'clock where the hour hand and the minute hand line up at 12, but they don't line up again, not at 12 o'clock, but they line up again at 1 o'clock. And then the next time they line up again, it will be at 2 o'clock. Actually, it wouldn't be 2 o'clock, it would be 1:05 because the hour hand, for the minute hand to catch up at 1 o'clock, the hour hand has moved a little bit also. The exact same thing happens in the sky above us, and then specifically with Jupiter, moon, and sun. And we see that the next time they line up, it is in the next sign. Just like here, we go from 12 to 1. Here, we go from the 4th sign to the 5th sign. We can continue. So let's look at this. So if they lined up in 2026 in this sign, which is the 5th sign, or Leo, the next time they line up would be 2027, and it will be in Virgo. And that would probably be a little bit later in August or in September. So let's go look. So the next time they line up is at the 2027, the end of August, and you can see moon, Jupiter, and sun, they're all lined up, and they're lined up in Virgo. This is the 6th sign. This is the 6th sign right there. I'll change that. The movements above us in the heavens are the same as the clock. It is the same thing, and you've never been told that. They've not been told how to understand what's happening in the sky. You've been told to look at a clock, and you've not been told about your circle. It's always been true all around you. It's always been true that this has been in existence, but it's never been pointed out before. So, all right, so let's go to the completion of this. So now we're actually going to 2037. 20 years, remember, or 12 years, excuse me. We began right in the end of June 2025, and we said that Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. So 12 years later from 2025 is 2037. And here we see that Jupiter, Sun, and Moon are in the sign of Cancer. So 2037. July, this is early July, so this is, you can begin to see the shift. Like it doesn't line up perfectly because there's a shift, it lines up closely, but there's also another movement which this lines up to, but we haven't even taken in consideration. But that's why this is on July 11th as opposed to June 25th. This is 2037, And we see that the moon, Jupiter, and sun are going to become in alignment again in Cancer. So let's go put these actually together. This is the 2025. This is the 2037. They don't always align up perfectly. Right here, that says 7 degrees Cancer, and that says 20 degrees. So there's 13 degrees in between the two. Right here, we could see they lined up within 2 degrees of each other. But this is a rhythm which is always around us. And it is possible because we live in an entrainment reality to bring your entrainment outside of just Sun, Jupiter, or Sun, Moon, which is all in your face, and begin to add in Jupiter time. This is a friggin' dream, everybody. Like, that's the truth. This is a dream, and if you can make it make sense, well, then you can build upon it. So, Jupiter time. Being entrained to Jupiter time feels slow, unrushed, because there is more space in the same amount of time. Well, we could actually, well, there's two ways of looking at it. In this one example, that's true. But whereas the moon and Jupiter move on different speeds, Jupiter goes through the same space much, much more slowly. Remember what we have been told, okay? Time, space is an experience feeling. This is a dream. This is a dream, okay? Like we're going to like this sounds like I'm talking about like kind of like just concepts. But it's not concepts because they can be known. So being entrained to Jupiter feels slow and unrushed. Being entrained to the moon feels intense, but you get more done in the same amount of space. When the two are merged, it's feeling slow while going fast. So two examples of what that actually looks like is Neo in the Matrix. Remember that first Matrix movie when he finally figures it out and he's fighting the Sentinel and he's moving immensely slow, but the Sentinel is moving immensely fast. And you're like, how does that happen? Without having to lean into too deeply, that is the same idea of Jupiter time blending with moon time. And this just makes sense because this is easy to do because they are in a mathematic entrainment. They're on the same cycle. These time concepts can be known. The other example may be a little bit more real than, Neo, this character in a movie. And what do they tell you? You bend the spoon when you realize there's no spoon to bend. Like they're telling you, like that's literally what the dream world is. It's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. And if you could actually bend a spoon, well, then you'd be like that little kid sitting in the oracle's waiting room. But these are real concepts. Like this really is a dream, and Hollywood is something. So anyway, so let me give you a more realistic explanation. Like race car drivers, like a person who drives a race car, a person who drives a car in like really, really tight, close contact to other vehicles at speeds approaching 200 miles per hour, their relationship with speed is very different than someone who doesn't have a nervous system that responds in that sort of way. To them, it doesn't feel fast. It feels like Neo. Versus like if I was put in that situation and I had to drive at 200 miles per hour that close, it would not feel the same in my nervous system as it would someone who's a professional race car driver. That is an example, if you will, of being able to be slow and fast at the same time. So that's it for this video. These are big concepts, and they seem like You're like, they're real. And what I mean by that is they're measurable and knowable and experientially. The trick of the dream is to make you think what's not solid is solid. Okay? What's not solid is solid. So I want to wrap this up with different ways which we can dream and play together. So the first one is the personal holy days, where before you can move into like Jupiter time, like these ideas of what I'm talking about, like they're just, it's like learning how to play an instrument. You're learning the different rhythms, and you begin by learning the personal holy days. And this is understanding how your chart as just a touch point of your experience here. Your birth chart is, if you want to use it to interpret, you can. But before doing that, you should start at the more basis, which is just understanding what it means and then how it relates to calendar dates. And that's what we'll do with the personal holy days. And I'll just give you the dates and some explanations and like what to do and how to use them. The second way is the personal holy days plus the astro-analysis. And the astro-analysis is more or less what I've always done. You fill out an intake form and you more or less share with me, the perspective of your dream. And then I will show you how they correspond in dream world magic of astrology. Like it really lines up. But the point is to move outside of that. But before you move outside of it, you have to see. This is the disentangling of it. And then coupling that with the personal holy days, with your actual dates. Like being able to go and see your story and see how your story can be filtered through the lens of astrology. And then the desire to disentangle from that, just like what I did with the Herkimer, Anthracite, and Larimar, like let's just go back to the basis of it and reorganize it in a very real and creative way. And that's when we go and we tie the astro-analysis with the personal holy days. Personal holy days, you just get the dates. I'm not even doing the astro-analysis by itself anymore. Like it needs to have a container for you to jump into. And what that container is understanding the practice of personal holy days. That's like literally taking these ideas of understanding the time around us and reconfiguring how you relate to it in order to disentangle from what you have been conditioned to doing. And then lastly is the grounded consciousness course. Like to go through that is a disentangling process. It's still my birthday month. Make me a birthday offer. Make me a birthday offer. I want to get this information out to everyone who can begin to comprehend what I'm getting at. We're just doing the same thing as this. We are beautifully and creatively and with like a sense of humor, but then also with a sense of compassion of like this shit is intense. Like we're reformulating the variables of the stream. If this resonates with you, like if you're here, like if you stuck around to this far, this definitely resonates with you. Like one of these things is the next right step. My guess is this information is your next right step. And for me, like I need the support. And so contact me via email. And let's move this. Let's begin to move this process forward. I want to get deeper into the Jupiter time because there's something really significant there. So that being said, I appreciate your attention. I appreciate all the to make a video like this and to have no one watch it is, I wouldn't say it's for naught, but maybe it is. So I appreciate the fact that it's not for naught. Until the next time, this is mkwann, and I hope to hear from a bunch of you. Take care.